welcome back to the Mixing Music Podcast. I'm your host, Dee Kei, and with me today is my lovely co-host, the king of the Sphinx, Lu.
Yeah. I'm not going to lie. When I wrote that down, I didn't think you were going to say it. I just thought it was kind of funny. But I'm really glad you said it just because that put a smile on my face, man. The king of the Sphinx.
Yeah. Also, that's like the first time we've ever said, like, out of the 4 years we've been doing this, 3
Something
years we've
without
been doing
an
this
L?
together. Yeah, without an L. There's no alliteration or whatever that's called.
And I shortened the word just so y'all do what you want to do with that.
Yeah. There's a... yeah, that is alliteration. All right. But anyway, let's go to the episode today. This is an episode topic idea from a listener of the podcast on Instagram, goes by the tie-dye homie.
Mm-hmm.
Tie-dye homie.
I like that.
Shout out to you. This is, he or she asked, I'd love to hear a Dee Kei and Lu versus Dee Kei and Lu. Your views now and how you've progressed versus what y'all's thoughts were. So I think there's going to be like some technical tips with mixing. And then I think there's going to be some like philosophical things. I think in my line of thinking, they're mostly philosophical. In fact, I'm trying to think of some technical things now.
Mm-hmm.
And granted, it's really weird. Like, we've started the podcast. We've been doing it for
4 years.
Almost, 4 years. And I started a year before that. And so it's like 4 to 5 years is a long time. It's a ton of time. A lot of things happen in 4 to 5 years. A kid can graduate in high school in that amount of time.
To be honest, you can be a whole new person.
Yeah, in that amount of time. But also, at the same time, not long at all.
Yeah. Yeah. When I was 20, I'd be like, dude, that's 25% of my life. Now that I'm like 33, I'm like, nah, that's not that much of my life. 5 years, if you had to make let's put it this way. If you're considering doing anything in your life and you say, but it's going to take 5 years before I see any real results, just do it. 5 years ain't that long. Like, we've all experienced 5 years, and I bet you it doesn't feel that far away.
Yeah, for sure. And especially maybe it's just because we're getting older too. Like, we're both in our early 30s, so it's just like time slowly does change. Like, the perception of time changes as we have more time to base our life and perspectives off of. All right. One of the things that I'm finding interesting while thinking about this topic is how little I'm actually changing from a technical perspective in the sense of like mixing.
Mm-hmm.
I thought I would change significantly more. And I probably have in very small and subtle ways. Like, I think technically I'm not using the same habitual plugins that I was 5 years ago. Not even close. Like 5 years ago, it was like fresh off of Mix with the Masters with Leslie. So it's just like I'm using a lot of the same workflow and plugins as Leslie. And I can barely say that now. There's like a couple plugins that I'm probably continuing to use and a few like workflow things that I probably am using similar to then. But like using the Waves SSL channel to pull out the low end of a vocal. I rarely ever do that. I still like, it's part of my arsenal and part of my, my library of techniques that I can pull from every once in a while. I have the R comp at the default Leslie setting. So if I use R comp, the attack and release and all the settings are at the same settings from Leslie's time. But like, other than that, like, I'm almost not at all using the same techniques. I don't think, so like I'm evolving, but I can't say objectively that it's better or worse.
Mm-hmm.
I think that it's just like, I'm always trying new, I think that's just like chaotic, creative me, where I'm always trying different tools and seeing what I like. And currently, obviously, I like the sound of what I'm doing now. I don't think it's like superior. I wonder if that means anything. Like, I don't, like, it's so funny in politics, we like shame people for flip-flopping or changing their mind. But in real life, it's like as soon as somebody changes their mind, it's like that's actually like a really virtuous thing, like a sign of intelligence and self-awareness. So it's like, I don't know if me changing my workflow a ton is indicative of something good, like levels of self-awareness. or if it's something that's bad, where it's like I'm not changing as much because I'm stuck in my ways. Who knows? I don't feel stuck in my ways, and I feel very productive, and I feel very confident more than ever. And obviously, my work is the best it's ever been. Lu, do you know anything specifically technical that has been changing for you over the last 5 years?
Yeah.
Something you might disagree with yourself on from 5 years ago.
Yeah. Does gear have an honest difference in attracting, I guess, not necessarily clients, but how can I voice this? You know, back when I first started, I always wanted a studio with a huge set of gear. And DK, you've seen the gear that ever since we met, I've always had like a pretty good amount of gear. You know, not a ton. I wouldn't say like walls worth, but when we opened in the mix, we already filled up a dual rack bay on the side. The entire desk was full of gear and everything. And all that just came out of my bedroom. You know what I mean? Like it was a substantial enough gear that you could open a studio with. But back then I was like, if I'm going to record something, I'm going to record it with the best possible gear that I can, you know, and that mindset has not necessarily changed, but how I look at what's available has changed very drastically. So a good example of this is when we opened the studio, I did not have a gold plaque. And about a year after, I finally got news that a song I had recorded had, you know, earned it. That's cool. But looking at how some of the more successful records in my career have been recorded and like what the sessions were actually like versus like what I believed was necessary to get there, completely rocked the idea of like, do I even need to have this compressor? To be honest, I'm not even really fucking using it, you know. Like the want to have all the gear just kind of disappeared over the years. And not because like you're a fool to want a ton of gear. It doesn't make it the idea of like, oh, well, you know, no gear or gear, you know, it doesn't really matter, because that is kind of the notion. Me and you have agreed many times on the podcast that like, if you want gear and it's in your budget and it makes the job funner for you or gets you to point A to B faster, then go ahead and buy it, you know? But for me, using analog summers and things of that nature, I'm like, you know, to be honest, it's not really getting me to point B any faster. It's not really giving me the benefits that we all hope that these bigger budget pieces are going to give us. And because of that, I've started like really shrinking down on like my need for outboard gear, my want to do any outboard processing and everything, unless it was like a few choice pieces. Like you already knew that I loved my Retro Instruments double wide. I really loved that compressor. And even then, that was one of the cheapest compressors I owned.
Yeah, that was a nice compressor.
Yeah. So the thing that I've kind of like changed on is like having a wall full of gear is nice, but it's gone so unused for so long that recently I sold a lot of it and bought my own console for live audio finally, which that was a massive purchase. But even then, I didn't choose like getting like Waves recently came out with their own all-in-one compact console now for like $8,000 and all that. I didn't care to have a million bells and whistles. I looked for efficiency, workflow, and everything, which is kind of like the name of the game for recent Lu versus before. It was like, yeah, I don't mind the extra steps for summing. I don't mind the extra steps of having to print through analog and this and that. I didn't really care because I enjoyed it, but the busier you get, the harder it is to want to commit to doing that every time. And that's where it kind of switched up for me. It's like, yeah, I don't want to buy a ton of gear. I'm not looking at new gear like that as much. I am looking at a few choice pieces. Like I like what I saw with the new Pro Patch from Wolf Audio, which is Paul Wolf. I think that's really cool, and it's going to give X Patch a run for their money. But I also don't need a giant patch bay, but I'm still fascinated by what's on the market. But I'm just not after it like I was before. But one thing I still love to do, I still love building out people's studios. I still love putting them together. I'm just not seeing a benefit for myself to have that gear. Like, I think right now I'd rather have new furniture in my house than a new piece of gear in my rack.
I think with gear as well, like something that I think before, I want to be careful here how I say this. I think when 5 years ago I was pretty anti-gear. I still kind of am, but I'm for different reasons now. This is where I would disagree with. I think before I was coping really hard with being broke and not being able to have gear by being anti-gear. And now it's like I have gear, I've had gear, I've used gear because I've had access to it and the money, financial means to back it up. But I still agree with you. I find myself I still use it occasionally because it's fun and it sounds different, but it's not at all superior. And I don't feel like I need it in order to do my best quality work.
Yeah.
So I think that's not, my opinion really hasn't changed, but my reasoning has a little bit. And I think I do have to admit that at the earlier stages of my career, it was coping for the inability to, the lack of access to it. I still stand strong on like, Lou and I, we fought a lot, not fought.
No,
we
debated.
We debated a lot on the use of gear, and we kind of found common ground. And because before we were talking about like the only reason to have specific types of gear is for commercial studios when people are seeing it. But I think even to that point, we've both loosened up a little bit. Where it's like, yeah, that's kind of true, but like not really. You know, like,
like if the client is only booking you because of your gear, that's probably a red flag.
Yeah. Well, one of the first things that I think I've changed a lot technical wise is at first I was really 5 years ago, I was very skeptical and hated the concept of sound ID. I was like, remember, I think I've said that on a few earlier episodes. Like I was really conceptually against it and theoretically had a lot of good reasoning, including like phase alignment and things like that. Couple of years ago, I picked it up and started using it to try it out. Haven't looked back since. I cannot, like I must work with it. Which is kind of bad because it's like I'm over reliant on Sound ID now, but like at the same time, it's like I think it is a fantastic tool. And that's one of the major first things that I've ever flip-flopped on. And the second thing, another technical thing I'll be real quick on is I still don't think Atmos is good for music. I think any Atmos mix of a stereo mix sucks. I think Atmos is great for VR, TV, film, something that's not music. But when it comes to music, I think that Atmos is, especially the fold down version of Atmos into headphones, is objectively worse. I think that there's less punch. I think that there's too much dynamics and there's no ability to be able to squish something to the degree that you could with stereo, which with stereo mixes, you can leave it super dynamic if you want, but you can also crush it. With Atmos, you can't crush it. So now you have less dimension in that sense. I think even in the speaker sense, it's like you're losing a big center and it's just so inaccessible from a speaker perspective. That being said, the one thing I have changed my mind on is that I do offer Atmos mixing as an add-on, but only if you like, only for clients that hire me for stereo mixes, and then I can up mix to Atmos because that's fairly easy to do and I could do that. Let's see. I used to, no, not really. At the beginning, I loved my sub with my ATC, and then I kind of went for a couple years without a sub, and then started saying like, oh, you don't need a sub. And then I had a humbling moment where I realized I needed a sub, and so last year I got a pair of subs, if you remember that, and haven't looked back since, so I'm back. So I went back and forth on that. I've always, from the beginning of the podcast, I've always had a commercial studio space. And I've always, even at the beginning, I said like, even having a commercial professional looking space makes you look professional and build that like aesthetic, not aesthetic.
That image.
Being in a professional space, like the PR of being in that professional location is a huge boost and does bring you income to people. Like, even if you don't have skill, like you look like you have skill if you have a professional location. Although I still agree with that to a certain degree. I no longer think that that's necessary, we are no longer, I'm personally no longer investing in that. Probably won't for at least a long time in the future. I might change my mind again in the future, but we shut down In the Mix this year, and I'm very okay with that. Yeah. And I think that's partially due to like being in LA. I don't think I'd feel the same if I was in a smaller music city, but being out here where like I'm way too busy just as mixing and I don't need to be away from home and I can mix everything from home and get my work done and make more money than running a commercial location and not have to manage a bunch of 20-year-olds, which was like fun, but I'm getting a little bit too old for that. Let's see here. Lou, you wanna? I have a list of other things. If you want to if you think of something, stop me. But I'm gonna keep going otherwise.
Sure. Yeah.
Okay. I think before, this is more philosophical. We'll go back into like the technical stuff here. I think before I don't know if I was ever fully delusional and like thought that I am the shit. But I think subconsciously I felt really inferior and felt a super strong desire to prove myself and prove dominance and superiority, not in a competitive way, but more from like a compensating from my end.
Mm-hmm.
Not to dominate over anyone else. But so like what I did is I presented myself as arrogant. And I think this was actually, in retrospect, I genuinely think that this was helpful. Like I think my level of arrogance was very practical and I think boosted my career and skills and respect to a level that I think was valuable. So what I'm not saying is that I regret being arrogant, but what I am saying is that in retrospect, it was pretty obvious now that I was arrogant, and I probably still am in a lot of different ways. But it's funny that how much I realized that it helped. I genuinely don't think that I didn't burn any bridges while I was arrogant. And granted, like my level of arrogance is significantly more mild than other people's levels of arrogance.
You have Mormon arrogance.
Yeah, sure. No, like I was still service oriented. I think that's the biggest thing. Like I was still there to help others, but I just thought I was the shit. So it's like some people like are very arrogant and like are very selfish. And so I was very arrogant, but still outward focused and service oriented. So I think that was a really good balance. Now I think I'm the shit, but it's not like I'm trying to prove myself. I genuinely, like if someone compliments me or if someone disses me, both of those affect me the same way, which is not at all. Like I genuinely, like if anything, when people compliment me now, I'm trying to be neutral, but it's starting to become a negative thing. It's like, okay, what do you want from me? If someone compliments me now, I'm like, if anything, it's like a little bit more weary of compliments. And like disses have almost no effect to me. And in fact, it's really strange. And I mean this in like the most, I'm being like really transparent and open here. And like at the risk of looking like a dick. Now when someone talks shit to me, I'm assuming that I'm so confident that like, it makes me feel better. It's like, oh, like they have no idea. Like I'm so sure in my ways and in my sound that them disagreeing with me is a reflection of their lack of taste or different tastes and has nothing to do with me personally. Like I'm less capable of taking disses personally now. Where compliments do feel more like personal in a bad way recently, which is actually kind of a bad thing. I'm not going to lie to you.
Yeah. Something that you touched on, which was like kind of like the image of it all, right? I know back in the day we talked about niche, when to niche down and things of that nature if you're going after a certain path. I think back in the day I always thought I had I guess you could say, a very naive look at the different roles in audio in the concept of, there are people who do mixing, there are people who do mastering, there are people who do recording, there are people who do it all. And the mindset of a jack of all trades is a king of none, but still better than one is something that we're all kind of overall familiar with. But for whatever reason, they're always carried like a deep down notion where it's like, well, if you do it all, you're not really very good at one of them, are you? And that's not really been the case later in my years. The older I get, the more I talk to people my own age, because I've always had older friends. And a lot of people, once they get older, they just kind of want to do the one thing that they love to do, right? And so they niche either out of passion or because their career has kind of put them on that path. Like some people were interning at the studio to become recording engineers, only to find out that they love going into production and A&R stuff. So like you see people from Record Plant who were interns just to be an engineer go on to have like higher managerial roles at labels, because that's kind of something they fell into, or they found out that they loved that. But a lot of times where we start, we kind of see like our goalpost as like, that's the cool one. That's the one I want to be involved in, right? Because of that, I feel like early on, I knew I wanted to be more in like the mixing side of things, because I love mixing. I love putting studios together as well, though. And that kind of meant that if I really wanted to be taken seriously on one department, you have to almost only do that thing. Then you start experiencing burnout. The harder you work on something that you're not, I guess you could say 1,000% there, right? You love it. You're doing it every day. You're pushing really hard, but you're just kind of like at a certain point, you know, you're kind of burning out. And what I figured out for myself is that burnout kind of related to like part of what I was also rejecting in that process, because I wanted to be taken more seriously in one role, which I knew I was good at. There's a reason I'm getting paid, and that's because I'm good at what I do, and you know, people like working with me. That's what it comes down to at the end of the day for most people in our industry. They like what you do and they like working with you. But I also really like doing live. I really liked building studios. I really like woodworking and building things with my hands. So I actively would not promote like my live audio work and things of that nature. I actively wouldn't promote my acoustic panel building and all that kind of stuff, because I actually like building things that are really nice. I feel very satisfied by that. Even though it's all music related and I would essentially be doing things that I love either way, it's like that whole image thing. And I put a lot of weight to building a certain image, thinking of hey, if I was a corporate brand, this is the thing we do. We don't do a million things. We do this one thing. We're really good at this one thing. Hire us for this one thing. I have completely flipped on my view on that. I like personally, I love doing live audio. I think it's fun. I think it's exciting to be surrounded by the crowd. Like we did the Peacock Theater this Saturday, Kings of the West, which had Snoop Dogg, Ice Cube, had, was Ice Cube there? I forget. But E40 was there, Too Short was there, like West Coast legends up and down. I know Lefty Gunplay showed up during the DJ Quick set. And I know Lefty Gunplay right now is really popular because Kendrick's new album. I know he's a part of that. But it's really cool to see like crowd reactions to the work you're doing and hear your mix on the big speakers and everything, and hear just the performance and how the crowd is interacting with the music you get to work on, and then be able to actually like recap shows and all that. It's a really great feeling. And I get that same feeling from like turning in a mix or a master and having that client be, happy with that. So I've kind of changed my view from like, hey, you gotta niche down. You have to be that guy that's known for this one thing, to like be the guy that that client needs. And if it's something that aligns with something that you love doing, do that. Just do what you love. Forget the niche part. That serves a purpose of branding and building your clientele for one specific department. But if you're like me and you actually enjoy doing multiple things, that's totally cool. Do it. And I think somebody that I was recently seeing, you actually got to meet him, the engineer for Wolfpack.
Yeah.
He's got a beautiful studio. He does some amazing work in that studio, and he still will tour and do live audio and everything. And yeah, I don't think any differently of him. I don't wonder about the sensitivity of his ears after doing live sound. I don't worry about like, well, he doesn't have that cool of gear because he doesn't pay too much attention in the studio. He's more of a live guy, or he's more of a studio guy, not a live guy. Like all of that doesn't matter to me. I hit up Gerhard all the time, seeing him building his home and building it by scratch and everything. And because I like to build things myself, like I'm always DMing him like, hey man, just to let you know, like that's really fucking cool. I'm really happy to see that you bought your own home and that you're building it by hand. You're building your own panels. You're doing all this stuff. Like, that's really cool. Don't worry. Like, he doesn't buy anything name brand or anything. He builds a lot of his own stuff. And I think that's one of the coolest things. Like, the whole gear switch up, like, that's cool if you have a tube tech. That's cool if you have distressors. That's cool if you have a 1073. That's cool. But having it isn't what makes you cool in my eyes. It's like the passion you put in behind something makes you cool in my eyes. And so like my approach to the career has been very different, where I'm happy that I still get hired for mixing. I'm still very happy that I get hired for mastering. And I'm really happy to say that I've kind of started touring again, as a front of house guy, because like that part of it, when I walked away from it, it didn't hurt to walk away from it because I wanted to niche. But I'm glad to do it again because I'm like, dude, I'm having fun, to be honest. Like showing up to the arena, getting everything set up. I've kind of chosen more to make money doing what I have fun doing more than like any specific niche. Like I'm not really caring to be the guy that's known for doing one thing and one thing only.
Yeah, that's
Yeah.
true. So we're talking about niching and specializing and stuff. I think that's an interesting topic as well. For me, specifically with that, I built my early career off of niching into recording, mixing hip hop in Utah,
Mhm.
mostly because nobody else did hip hop. And I moved out here and have started with hip hop, but completely niched out of it. I'm gonna say something that I want and I need people to take at face value.
Take it badly, people.
Yeah, because people will consider this. In fact, I'm gonna go ahead and say that what I'm about to say, if you don't take it at face value, makes you racist. So be careful with this. Just culturally, as I got older, I think hip hop is just totally against my values. Not from like a music perspective, but like the community around it. The drugs, the weed, the drinking, the violence, the lack of punctuality, the lack of responsibility, just culturally across that genre. Just
something you're not aligned with.
Yeah, and then most importantly, the thing that I'm mostly my biggest thing. This changed specifically. There was a moment in time specifically where like I felt betrayed because I'm someone that loves hip hop, loves hip hop, loves rap music. But I felt very betrayed by Drake's album Her Loss.
I'm so curious.
I genuinely think that there's a lot of creativity in hip hop, and I think there's a lot more progression to be made with the genre of hip hop. But Her Loss was, for me, the beginning of the end of hip hop. It was the least creative, low effort, money focused, non-creative endeavored project I've ever heard. And there's some good bops on there, but there's no argument to be made that this was good for creativity. Like the art of music and the art of hip hop, the art of engineering. No, it wasn't. It was self-aggrandizing and obviously for make a quick buck. And I think the audience agrees because not a single one of the songs on that album is in Drake's top 10 on Spotify. In fact, it was one of the lowest bought and lowest played albums of his entire career. It was a flop, complete and utter flop in every aspect of his career. And that's when like Twitch streamers started doing 30-second beat runs of his songs and other songs and stuff like that. And I'm like, all right. Because here's the thing too. It's like one thing that I've changed my mind on before. This was like a career for me, like a potential career. So like with hustle culture, which I'm no longer a huge proponent of. Like before with my hustle culture ideologies and ideas of just like working harder. And as much as I still agree with that partially, at this point, my biggest endeavor, my biggest reasoning and passion stays with what some people would call God or the universe. I call it art. I don't do this for you. I don't do this for me. I do this to progress art because one thing's true for all time and eternity is that music changes me. Music helps me feel. I am so damn passionate about music. And I have become more and more refined with my tastes and more refined with my purpose. I do everything that I do for the art of music. Okay? Now, some people use different language. They say, like Rick Rubin is famous for saying, like, when you write a song, it's for God. It's for more than us. And I think that you can use that language if you want. For me, the word that I use is art. I do it for the art of music, for the craft of music. And that is very important for me. And that's a specific project that was no longer for the art of music, and it lost me. And I think people are going to lose it. And this is part of the reason why I'm very excited about AI, so we can refocus on the art of music, which is not an end result. It's not a song that you can in and output. It's the human creative process and struggle. It's the story of each record, the story of the burgeoning of Michael Jackson, the story of the Beatles, right? In Abbey Road Studio. It's those things make the human process of art. It's not a song.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. I'm done with that. That almost went on a dangerous rant. So nowadays I do a lot more like alternative music. I do a lot, mostly pop. I do a lot of hyper pop these days. But I mean, I think the genres, I think it's partially due to changing with the times.
Mm-hmm.
But I also think it's just personal desires lined up with destiny or fate. So I do think that like before I was, and I think partially I'm not strong enough to do rap and hip hop. I think there's a lot of people that I highly respect that are significantly more mature, stable, and brave than I am to be able to do hip hop. And I still think hip hop is an important genre, but I quickly realized that it's not for me when moving out here. Utah hip hop and rap culture out there among rappers is very different than it is out here.
I imagine it's a lot cleaner.
Significantly more. People ask permission to swear.
Yeah.
Out there in Utah.
Something that I've kind of switched over on is subscription models.
Oh, interesting.
Yeah.
In what way?
So I don't like the idea of never owning something. I don't like the idea of I'll give a great example of this that's going to be very quick. I bought my own live console. I know I could just rent one for the shows that I need, but there's something that just agitates me knowing that like every time I need it, I have to rent it and all that kind of stuff. And it becomes this perpetual bill that you just never get rid of. And the moment you get rid of it, like you just have this hole in your setup, so to speak. Like if you need a recall and you were subscribed to that plugin company, I never liked the idea of thinking, oh, you know what? I don't want to have to pay $25 a month for 12 plugins. That's stupid. I'll just have the few that I need, right? Subscriptions have come a long way. They've come a very long way in the last 4 years. Back then, I think the only subscription models that really existed, I think like Plugin Alliance
Slate,
had just jumped in. It was Slate. And
what happened to Slate, dude?
Slate sold the company. And so it's now Slate Digital as a brand, but not tied directly to Steven Slate anymore. That's why you never see him doing his pancake flips or walking around in a black tight t-shirt with gel in his hair.
Pancake flips?
Yeah, you never saw him in the little apron and he's like cooking something in the kitchen. He's like, I've got the hottest deal for you guys. And if you buy this plugin bundle, you'll be on the same level as Chris Lord Algae. It's like, you know, that's bullshit. And we like, it's very obvious to see through the marketing. But you know what? No matter what I say, the man succeeded. The man sold the company. He could retire if he wants today in his mansion. And no matter what I say, would not affect him in the fucking slightest. So I have all due respect to that guy, but I just hated the marketing. But with that said, back then I saw plugin subscriptions as like the worst financial decision you can make, because for $25 a month for plugins that normally go on sale for $50 and there was only 12 of them, we're talking about $300. That's 1 year's worth of the subscription. You could just buy the plugins every time they go on sale and they're only $50. And then every time an update came out for them, you got the update. So it just financially didn't make any sense. Now you've got companies like Plugin Alliance. They're doing, Waves is offering all their plugins for $25 a month. Slate is now partnered with SSL, and I might be wrong on this, but I believe they have Harrison under their fold now. So now you're seeing plugin companies offer potentially, you know, if not close to 50 plugins now to like hundreds of plugins for like $20 a month, $25 a month. You know, the most egregious one being right now is like Pro Tools at like what, 35 for studio? I forget what it is, but if you're only subscribed to one, maybe two, and you choose the two that I think make the most sense which would be Waves and Plugin Alliance right now. I think that's okay. Honestly, I think that makes more sense than buying the plugins, especially considering how badly Waves likes to screw people who own their plugins with, like, every time a new update comes out, you have to pay for the update unless you're on their like within a year thing of buying their plugin. So for $25 a month, I think you get like the Mercury bundle, or maybe it's all their plugins. I forget what it is, but I remember receiving a couple sessions where people were buying the latest plugins. And I don't use a lot of Waves myself, so I don't really keep up with them. And then it became like a cost of like, okay, 25 here, 50 here, this and that. And it became very spotty, you know, transactions. And one day I'm looking at my bank account and I'm like, I spent $600 on Waves in the last 2 years when I could have paid $25 bucks a month, or their promotional thing I think is like $250 for the year, right? I would have actually saved $100 and I would have had all the other plugins on top of that. At a certain point, it actually financially made more sense to subscribe to Waves because long run, there's a lot of their plugins I really don't care about, and I'm okay with not having them. But it was more about my income being affected that I didn't have them at that point, because people were sending me sessions and I just didn't have the plugin. This was not the case 4 years ago. Back then, if you had a subscription, the likelihood of somebody having those same plugins was probably pretty high. They all wanted the Slate plugins. But that was the one time you had an issue and you kind of knew the few that people wanted. So, you know, you didn't really have to have like, you know, the virtual mic collection. There was no point of you having that. Most people were printing that down. But now if you have like Plugin Alliance users that you work with, chances are they're on the subscription model because they have hundreds of plugins on theirs. And this is obviously not to serve as an ad, but if they use the Acme compressor, and I don't have the Acme compressor, now I have to get the subscription or just pay for the plugin. But their plugins were so good the whole time that when they came out with the subscription, I was like, this is the one that is actually worth it. The Plugin Alliance subscription, if I had to choose one out of the many, that's the one that's most worth it. Now I've added on the Waves just because, okay, now that everybody is not cracking the plugins. Yeah. Now that not everybody's cracking it because they could just pay $25 a month, and people would rather pay the $25 than go through the hassle of potentially installing a virus.
Dude, I do the $15 a month one.
With plugin?
Yeah. Hold on. Yeah. Or with, no, with Plugin Alliance, I'm paying like $10 a month for Waves. I'm doing like the $10 or $15 a month for like, instead of 250 plugins, I get the 150 or whatever.
Yeah, it's usually the core ones you need. Like, I don't need the binaural stuff.
Talking about if you're trying to move away from subscriptions and you want to move to Pro Tools, here's a great deal for you. If you're also in the market for an interface, the Mbox Studio, which I don't know how good it sounds, but aesthetically speaking, I think is one of the best designed interface ever. I mean,
just the new one with the two knobs on top?
Dude, it looks so good. Like, I want one just to have one, because it looks great.
I finally saw one in person. I thought it was going to be small, but it's
pretty big.
Kind of big. Yeah.
Yeah. It's on Sweetwater. It's on sale right now. It's usually like $800, $900, but right now it's $500. And if you buy it, you get a free perpetual Pro Tools Studio license. And the Pro Tools Studio license, I think, is like $400 anyway. So for $500, you get the Mbox and a perpetual one-time pay studio, Pro Tools Studio.
Just to communicate this is also Cyber Monday, the day we're recording this.
It's been like this actually for the last couple months. I am seeing exclusive offer. It says limited time offer last day right on it. Oh, but I have been seeing this exact sale for the last few months, even before
Okay,
November.
Gotcha. So they might just be saying it's last day, and then tomorrow they might say like sale extended.
Regardless, we are sponsored by Sweetwater, and so it doesn't save you any money, but it does give us some money for free if you do go to our link and purchase something after using our link. How you do that is mixingmusicpodcast.com/Sweetwater. And then it'll like add a cookie to your to your browser. And then next time you check something out, Sweetwater will credit us for it and give us a few bucks. So if you're going to buy something anyway, just go to our links, mixingmusicpodcast.com/Sweetwater. On that note, also, let's do a quick plug for our exclusive content. One of the only ways that we monetize the podcast, the most effective way that we've monetized the podcast is through the exclusive content. Not only do you get a ton of very valuable technical information twice a week on the exclusive podcast in small 10 to 20 minute bite-sized episodes with me and James, you get access to all the episodes that we've done previously, which is over 200 episodes all at once for only $4 a month. So once again, go to mixedmusicpodcast.com/exclusive to subscribe for all of those episodes. And again, all those episodes are ad-free. So that's fantastic. On that note, let's keep going. Lou, going back to the subscription model, I don't think I've changed my mind on that. I kind of hate that, but I think it's kind of like a necessary evil. I haven't thought that too much. Let's see here. Something dumb. Aesthetically, I think I've changed before. I used to like the purple dark studio room with black lights. Now, not at all. Like I'm looking like at the Zendo type aesthetic with like natural wood and natural light. And I still like purple a lot, but this is for the podcast. Like if you're watching on video right now, whether that's on Spotify or on YouTube, which by the way, if you do listen on Spotify, you can. I do upload the videos to Spotify, which is relatively new. I'm still in a purple room, and I think that I have my light set up that it can do that. But when I'm working by myself, I'm like in a lighter environment. I think that's just like a personal preference.
I think one of the, like touching on what you just said, I think one of the things that I think you've completely flipped on, I don't know if you've realized this or not, but I remember when we first opened the studio and we were first spending like a lot of time together, like the first couple months. Man, would you have the brightest lights I've ever seen in a room.
Oh,
Holy
yeah. I bought
cow.
hydroponic like indoor growing lights. Well, that was because of COVID and we didn't go outside.
Yeah, but you also would mention that like the light would also help you focus is one of the arguments you would make for it.
Huh.
It created that like, okay, we're like, wow, holy shit, everything's bright. I'm present.
Yeah.
Yeah, when I don't know when you stopped using those lights, but I would like, as you were mentioning, like I used to like the darker studio and like this and that. And I'm like, man, I do not remember that with those lights.
That's true. Actually,
those lights are flipped now, though. I don't see
point.
DK with those lights.
I would love a totally white out, sterile room. I still kind of like that. Okay, never mind. I haven't flipped on that. That's you're right. I changed my mind. You're right. I haven't flipped on that. I prefer natural light. I like being in a bright room. I don't like being in dark places.
I know something we both flipped on without communicating it necessarily or it being such a big deal to us.
What's that?
Giant studio furniture, like the Argosy desk.
That's
I don't think I've actually, like for a while, I've always wanted like an Argosy desk or something of that nature. And I had like my little Zayor that I was always very happy and fond of.
Mm-hmm.
But what I liked about the Zayor was it was like a compact version. And then I just liked having gear right in front of me. But the more I had the gear right in front of me, the more it just kind of made me feel cluttered on my desk and things like that. And then once I started seeing people around doing like smaller desks, because like picture this. This goes back to the whole gear thing from earlier. Everybody always wants a nice aesthetic studio. You know, everybody wants to feel like they walked into something very professional. So the big studio furniture desk was always kind of like an iconic thing to see, whether you had a console or not. As long as it was big, it looked impressive. But then you started seeing people like Tizio and John Castelli and things of that nature just always promoting their little desk. And there was almost a meme for a little bit where it's like, oh, you're working with the guy that engineers in LA when they have this setup. And it was like the Hilo, the PMCs, the little folding table desk or wood top desk. But then like actually hearing people's setups, like I kind of started like wondering, I'm like, I do notice that when I go to these people's setups, like it does arguably sound better in their setups, even though they don't have like the big studio furniture. I'm like, I wonder if the studio furniture is playing like a comb filtering effect, like into how we hear things and things of that nature, like with the whole boundary issues of reflections. I can arguably say now that I'm kind of happy not having a bigger desk. Like seeing a bigger desk actually kind of worries me more if it was factored into the way the room sounds than it just being big. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
That's cool and all, but I don't know. I've actually been loving, maybe this is the mastering side of the work that I love. And I know a lot of mastering guys have smaller setups because of, them wanting to minimize any acoustic factors, which at a certain point it goes overboard. I've seen some guys setups that are just like, bro, you don't need to be mixing on a fucking needle stick. But we also see people like Jesse who just doesn't have a desk. He just puts a keyboard and mouse on his lap and he's very happy and comfortable with that.
Yeah.
So I feel like the thing that I've really flipped on is if you want to be taken seriously, you have to have a really nice desk. But I'm like, just choose the desk that honestly works the best for you. And everybody can make the argument, the less of an obstruction, the better it could sound. But I think at the end of the day, it just kind of came down to like, yo, what's your comfort level? What's your comfort level? Because we all get used to our monitors. We all get used to our room at a certain point, and we learn to work in our rooms. So if you got a little bit of comb filtering from your desk, who cares? As long as you like your setup and it's convenient for you. The thing that bothered me later in life was just having cables on the table, having a bunch of different things, and it just made me feel cluttered. And so the smaller desk ended up being the route I went to. And I didn't realize how much I liked it until I had my own office at the same building as the studio, where when I put the Zayor in there, I was like, damn, I'm not going to lie. I don't like the Zayor being in here. Like, I actually kind of prefer going back to a smaller desk.
Yeah. I think the most important part of all this is the process. Just like the process of deciding what's good for you.
Yeah.
And I always value 100% value authenticity over peer pressure or like doing something because somebody else told you to. So it's like going through the process of figuring out what you prefer, even if you decide that you value aesthetics over practicality. That's cool. That's a decision and a process and a decision that you came to through processing.
Yeah.
And so
what desk is cool? That Northwood one.
Ooh, those are nice, but also very expensive.
Yeah.
And then anyway, I don't think I flip-flopped on that. I think I tried going smaller desk, but I decided that aesthetically I didn't like it. And also sound-wise, it didn't improve it when I was doing sweeps and stuff. In this room specifically, I might change my mind later. But I genuinely tried to. I went through the process of it. Before, let's see, when I first started, sometimes I would say that runners are crazy.
Runners?
That's funny. Yeah, runners are crazy.
Like the people running on the street or runners at the studio?
I just thought runners were masochistic.
I mean, you're not entirely wrong. Some people might just, do it for a different reason you do.
Sure. Some runners are. You know what changed since the beginning of the podcast? Like a major life event that continues to have and will continue to have a major impact on my philosophy and perspective in life. No, I was going to say Kyo, my youngest, my second.
Nice.
Having a disabled child, and I'm definitely virtue signaling and sharing superiority by saying that explicitly. No, just kidding.
Just remember, none of you guys are ever gonna level up to DK level. Okay?
I'm a better person than all of you for fathering a disabled child.
Elon Musk wishes he could.
Dude, I am virtuous and such a good person. Yeah. No, I'm teasing.
DK for 2028.
Oh my gosh, dude! I'm not a natural born citizen. I can't run for president.
You're unnaturally born. You were born out of the butt. Sorry, guys. Red man.
No. I will say having. Well, I think the most important part of processing all this is that I wasn't expecting it. So fun fact, regardless about how you feel about abortion in the United States, due to a lack of screening, there's not an exact number. So it ranges from about 60 to 90% of all pre-screened Down syndrome children are aborted before being born. In Iceland, it's famously 100% of Down syndrome children are aborted before being born, and most of modern first world countries in Northern Europe are 90%. But that's because due to and it's pretty high. It's like close to 90% in Japan as well. In our case, I don't know if it was because the severity was too low to be able to be seen, or if we didn't do the proper pre-screening, who's to say. But one of the craziest things with our situation is that we didn't know. We didn't know that he was going to be Down syndrome until he was born. And then the doctors are like, he's looking extra Asian. And then, and they're like, what do you mean? Like, duh.
Like,
and he's like, no, like
Asian
more
parents.
Asian than normal. No, this is actually a real story. They're like, we think he might have Down syndrome. And we're like, what? And it's like, you can tell the small hands, the flat face, the no bridge, like the small eyes. And they're like, oh yeah, we are Asian. I literally said that. And it was like peak 2020. So it's just like peak Black BLM movement type stuff, anti-racism peak. So it's just like, I just actually couldn't laugh. The nurse couldn't laugh. But anyway, yeah, I've always been into comedy. And
can you tell?
we were that happened. And honestly, that changed my perspective a lot. And I don't think that this is something that I disagree with myself on, rather than I've grown up about and matured on. Just like the concepts of self-acceptance, the concept of competitiveness, of comparison, of ability or disability, right? And the concept of love and service and humility and gratitude. I think wisdom and intelligence, altruism, my life significantly shifted in that moment in ways that I could not have possibly preconceived, and in ways that I cannot possibly even fathom, because I think that my life and perspective will continue to change because of that singular moment as Kyo, my youngest, gets older. This is a huge one for me. And I say this like selfishly, like it's not like he was born retarded, so that makes me a great person. No, I'm not saying that. What I am saying is that like I didn't realize how self-centered I was before. And that wasn't a bad thing. Like I said earlier with the arrogance thing, like I don't think it was a bad thing, but I think that my priorities and desires changed significantly. And my perspectives on life and passion and purpose changed significantly. And I think that is something that I think that will never, ever. I think that was like the single biggest life changer, ego changer, mind changer that I could ever go through. And my God, am I grateful for that? For real. Mm-hmm. I think this is like something that I should properly take the time to write down and learn to articulate. I don't think I'm going to be able to successfully articulate the proper benefits and how that changed my life in this moment on the spot. But talking about things that I've changed my mind on, I think just perspective on life flipped in that singular moment with that singular child. Mm-hmm. And in like a not messed up way, like I wish everybody has a Down syndrome child. Like I don't mean that. Like,
no. I just love the way you had to clarify that. You're like, and in a not bad way. Like I hope you do. And it's like,
yeah, dude.
Somebody
waiting.
Probably heard that and was like, wait, what?
Keep waiting till your woman is over 30 to have a child, because your chances of having a Down syndrome kid goes up significantly.
Well, then I guess me and Anna are looking good for that. Yeah,
there you go. And it's already in your genes, apparently, if you got a couple uncles
on both
or whatever.
sides. So,
yeah.
You know, I have doubled odds. Like, I'm surprised it missed me.
There you go.
Yeah.
We're going into Shane Gill's territory, but
yeah.
I think that's like
no, he got scathed. It just completely missed me.
It nicked me. I'm a daywalker myself.
I'm a daywalker.
He's good at the face. All right. I let me think on how how specifically that changed my ideas from before
Sure.
then.
I've got one for you.
Go ahead.
Studio decoration types. I think early on, me and you had a conversation about this, very specifically, like having the sneakers on top of speakers and stuff like that. You know, I remember seeing, I know they were your speakers, but like, yeah, those sneakers, but on top of the ATCs and the JBLs. And I was like, I don't know if I like that.
But you said you didn't like it because you were scared of them getting stolen.
That, and there is also like there was an image that I had in my head for the studio, but I realized that we needed to be mutual on things. So my main concern was safety, because I'm like, dude, that fucking Kanye shoe is like $10,000. Like, please do not put that at eye level. Please. And I remember some people in the studio be like, I'm surprised they haven't been stolen yet. I'm like, see, it was on his mind. I'm not saying he was going to do it, but everybody that saw him was like, you know, they're not that, it wouldn't be that hard. But in the 4 year, the 3.5, whatever amount of years that we had that studio, like I kid you not, the day you took him home was like the day I also thought, I'm like, I am shocked that they weren't stolen. I've had smaller things stolen for stupider reasons that were harder to get to.
I think it's because they're too valuable and too easy to steal that people were like way too, like there's something in them. And then, but that's another thing too. It's like I went from being a sneakerhead to not being one at all. And it's a problem because I just have no space for shoes because I have way too many shoes and I don't wear them. I just don't wear, and on occasion, and here's the problem too, is because I'm so removed from that sneakerhead world now. Well, I think like high-end streetwear fashion to begin with, like I used to spend a lot of money on like Supreme and a lot of other streetwear brands.
You know, it's funny that you have like the wet grass thing behind you.
Yeah, like
and I recently did an install for somebody who has like I'm not even trying to be mean by saying it, but like they obviously wanted it because the one that they have is not the original.
It doesn't matter, dude. Yeah, it doesn't matter.
Yeah, it doesn't matter. But it was one of those where I'm like, you weren't just into it. You have it.
Oh, dude, yeah. I stood in line at IKEA. I stood in line at IKEA before it opened to get this rug and my off-white clock and other versions.
Your kazoo, isn't your kazoo a Supreme?
Oh, I have a Supreme Melodica, and then I also have my couch cushion is the IKEA off-white pillowcase. Anyway, pillow, and so yeah, I've been into all that stuff, and I think this goes back to like my feeling of inferiority. Like I wanted to prove that I was wealthier than I am, or that I'm higher end than I actually was by buying a lot of expensive stuff. And so on, like, this is more like internally speaking, is that I no longer feel at all inferior to anybody else, or like at least that level of inferiority is now within the realm of awareness. Like I'm aware of that and I'm able to control it. And I no longer have a feeling to appear superior or to prove superiority through clothing and aesthetics and style and fashion or just expensive things. That's just changed a lot. And I think that's like, I'm not going to say that that's like super important. I think people are aware of that and know that. And there's a lot of other like finance podcasts that will talk about the psychology of it. I'm not going to get into it.
Yeah. But I think where I flipped on that was a conversation I had with C. You remember C?
Of course. She's so badass.
Yeah, she's a fucking, oh my God. Every time I see her on Instagram, she's fucking making moves. Like if there's somebody I can say I consistently seeing, I don't understand what they do, but I know that they're doing what they do, is C.
Dude,
like I don't need to know what she's doing. You could see her doing
more than making moves. That is someone that
she's amazing,
real.
Dude.
She's real. And
I'm gonna text her and say hi.
It's yeah, me too. I need to text her and say hi. She's fucking real. She's super cool. I don't know how to explain it. There's something really like she's expressed herself how the trials of her past and the mental anguish that she has gone through in the past for whatever reasons, and yet she's one of those people that at the end of the day, money or not, has been able to maintain a proper, authentic level of altruism. Like when she was paying for Lucid and BG to come in, like, yeah, she liked the art of hip hop, but there was also a little bit, and she was like investing in these artists. Sure. But there's also a level of like just general altruism. Like she was serving her community and her friends and helping people in a way that only she could. And there was like within the hip hop circle, she was easily the most respectable person for me. She was just like, she was in it for what seemed like the right reason. Who's to say, right? Really. Yeah. But at no point, she was very respectful, very business minded, and obviously she's doing well. Oh yeah, I'm going to send this episode to her because she's awesome, and she should know that we think highly of her.
But the reason I bring her up on it is because I had a conversation with her once about the shoes, where I made the comment of like, man, yeah, I don't know about the shoes. Like, I'm not a shoe guy much myself, but like, I just don't know if we should just be like leaving them on top of the speakers and stuff. Like, I know we're going to put some on the rafters and stuff, but I think they are cool. But like, I just don't know about like leaving them at line of sight. And she's like, well, to be honest, part of the reason that I was actually booking you guys is because I like the style of the studio. Like, I'm a shoe person myself. And I was like, huh. You know, like, I'm a very much like, I want the studio to be presented in a way that is professional. I want it to be welcoming. We always wanted that environment to be welcoming. But I also wanted like, hey, we take what we do seriously, and I want that to be translated in what we do. So sneakers on top of shoes didn't give me that vibe specifically. Sneakers in the studio is still fine. But on top of the speakers, that was where like my little line was. But when C said that, I was like, I'm overthinking this. I'm way overthinking this.
Yeah, there's something true about building an aesthetic for your desired demographic.
Exactly.
For your demographic. So, I mean, at the end of the day, we didn't remove the shoes, mostly because I didn't know where to put them and I wanted them to be appreciated. Yeah. But even towards the end there, we went from being like a weed studio to a coffee studio. And I think that was like an important decision. We got a lot more
Which we inspired a coffee shop. Never forget that. We factually inspired the starting of a coffee shop.
Yeah, with one of our clients who started a coffee shop because we made them coffee. Which, by the way, it's funny because it was like really shitty coffee, but at the same time, like that's what got them started. Good for them. And so I think it's more like, here's another like ethical thing. Before, this will kind of be my last thing for this episode. And I think I'm going to use an anecdote and a specific example to prove a more overarching topic here. So I'm going to start with weed. Before Utah, very much, I talk a lot about theology and faith, but I keep it very open-ended. I rarely ever declare what I believe in, and I'm going to keep it that way. But at the time, I was very much a believer within the Christian realm. This is before Utah even. And so I believed in a singular truth and that my truth was superior. And then I went through an evolution, as many of us did during this more, in America, left-leaning, blue-leaning time period culturally, where I started to move to everyone has their own truths, which is, depending on how you look at life, I think relatively true, can be true. I do think that it's objectively the most dangerous way to perceive life. And so one of the things that I looked at, so again, I'm using weed here. I moved to California and I tried weed. I really liked weed. I thought I liked weed. Not for me in retrospect. It's like, it makes me lazy. It makes me sleepy. And I think it only added to my depression that I was coming up on or was already in. And I hated that so much. And I'm returned back to, now not through faith. I'm going to be very clear about that. Not through faith, but rather, I don't think weed is good for anybody. And hear me out on this. Hear me out on this. I think in moments and for individuals, it can be perceived as good in short term in short term mindsets. And I think that's where the danger is. I think that there is a singular truth, but I believe every single one of our perspectives on that truth is broken. So for me to say that my perspective on truth is more correct than your perspective is fundamentally incorrect. So in Christian language, I would say that who are we to determine what God has made for us and what God has not made for us? What God's intentions and plans are? Who are we to say? We're fucking retarded human beings. And we don't even speak the language of God or understand anywhere near the holiness of God. Why do we assume that we are, in our self-righteous descriptions of righteousness, who are we to determine who's more righteous than another?
Mm-hmm.
So I'm back at a singular truth because at the end of the time, if the data shows, especially now that weed has been legalized, like if you smoke weed really consistently, especially from a young age, you are chemically changed. You are fundamentally changed. And there is an addiction with weed that we're discovering, especially when you start at younger ages. And there is objective negative side effects to weed from overusage and over reliancy. So it's like the self-awareness of like, yeah, in smaller doses on occasion, not that bad. But over time, for most people who are not of the exception, it is objectively bad for you. And what we do as humans is like when we believe that everybody has their own truth, then we start to assume that we ourselves are probably the exception. And I no longer believe in that. Nobody is the exception. It's better for us to live in and self-sacrifice for the purpose of harmony. This is very Japanese and very Buddhist here. I will admit. But I will never judge anyone for smoking weed, but I also think it's incorrect to say that it's objectively wrong. I will never judge you for smoking weed. I will never judge you for liking weed, ever. Ever. Never will I do that. And it's very difficult for Westerners to understand what I'm saying at a face value. What I'm not saying is that this is black and white. What I'm saying, it's gray. But to say that it is inherently bad is incorrect. To say that it is inherently good is incorrect. It just is. And from my perspective, I think that I and my family, I will teach my family to avoid it. I'll teach my friends to avoid it. I didn't have a good time, and I don't think it is a good time, and I don't think it is conducive to creativity. But a lot of other people would disagree with me in that, and I will allow them to think that. I think that's great.
Mm-hmm.
I use weed as like kind of like an anecdote to something more sincere, which is I am very much not a believer of individual truths anymore. And I was at the beginning of the podcast. I would say things, even for mixing, it's like, you do what you want. You do what you want in the way that you want it. There's no such thing as a good mix. No, I'm back to there is such a thing as a good mix, and there are such things as bad mixes. How we get there and who determines bad and good mixes are completely subjective, but there are good mixes and there are bad mixes, and you can make a bad mix. If you don't know how to mix, you can make a bad mix. If you don't know how to mix, you can also make a great mix if you follow your taste. But all of our perspectives are broken, but there is still a singular, obscure truth. So this is more of like a philosophical change that I've had. You should take lessons. You should practice it. You should be aware of your inabilities and your mistakes, and you should improve constantly. But in which direction to improve is based on your own experiences and your own tastes. If you think that Billie Eilish sounds superior to John Mayer in mixing wise, then that's a taste that you decide on, but you must decide. And if you truly believe in it, then if anybody talks shit on your taste, it won't affect you. Like, for example, another anecdotal idea here. And this is like a very deep self-awareness concept that I don't think most people will even understand. And I'd love to have deeper conversations with this, but like this type of conversation is just not effective to have people that aren't open-minded to this. And I kind of am pushing boundaries by saying that, and I'm going to continue to say this. If you get pissed off, I think it's self I think it's projecting something deeper that should let you know that this is something that you should look within yourself on. But even the concept, I'm going to use another anecdotal concept here with, oh crap. I lost my string of thought there. Sorry, I was describing something and I lost my string of thought. I'll come back to it. But this idea of like certainty, I'm very against now. Very against certainty. And before, maybe I would put on my walls to remind myself, like, what would Jesus do? And now I would put on my walls, are you sure? When someone cuts me off and I get mad at them and I flip them the bird because I assume that they're being dicks, do I know for certain that they're being dicks? Are you sure? And I don't think the answer is rarely ever yes. I'm not sure. And even if they flip me off and reactively get mad back at me, am I sure that I wasn't in the wrong? And even if I'm at 99%, I'm not 100% sure. And that's the thing too. It's like, I'm trying to move away from this very judgmental phase of self-righteousness and correctness, and move back to this form of ideological correctness with the balance of certainty or a lack of uncertainty and ambiguity. In Christian circles, you say that Satan lives in the gray, that everything is black and white. And I disagree with that on a fundamental level. Even the words of Christ himself were very gray. And I think that that's very much on purpose. But the problem with gray and understanding things from a gray perspective is that it can degrade into individual truths. And that is the incorrect way. That is the incorrect way of... I believe that is the incorrect way of looking as interpreting gray. I mean gray as in we don't know for sure. There is no certainty. Is without certainty, there's no need or room for faith. And I think certainty kills unity. This is like a quote from Conclave: "Certainty is the enemy of unity." And certainty removes mystery, and without mystery, there's no place or room for faith. Great movie, by the way, Conclave. And so I think on that note, that extrapolated into a broader topic here with art and what we do, something so subjective, and with lifestyles and values and systems. And I think that it's important to understand that we are probably not part of the exception, that rules are there to build harmony, and harmonies should be more valued. Harmony should be more valued than self-indulgence. I think people should sacrifice self-indulgence for harmony. And we don't do that a lot as humans. As humans, we steer clear from that. And I think that's very... it can be, oh man, see how difficult this topic is? It's very difficult for me to use language to describe properly what I'm thinking without sounding like a hypocrite and determining one thing.
I'll give you a good example of a very basic way to look at it. Look at your marriage. Anybody's marriage, really. Sacrifice of your preferences, let's just say it like that. Like, you may not always agree on something, but you want peace in your household, right? So you guys might not agree on everything you do, but there are certain things that hey, between the two of us, like we know we need to make X happen, and it's just going to be better for the two of us overall. Like, we may not see eye to eye on it, but we're both going to have to sacrifice to make this possible. And that's kind of a funny thing. Nobody wants to think like you have to have sacrifice to have a good relationship, but I think that happens in your friendships, your relationship with your family. There's a small part of self-sacrifice that happens for the peace of the household, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
As a planet, that's very hard because you're not dealing with 5 or 6 people. You're not dealing with 1 or 2 people. You're dealing with fucking everybody's mama. So, you're never gonna fully impress your in-laws. You're never gonna fully impress your friends. by just saying, hey, everything I do is right. And if we do it all my way, everything will be better, but.
Oh, I remembered my string of thought, and another anecdotal example I think is like so perfect for this concept here. There's a radio show that has clips on Facebook every once in a while where they call people after they didn't get a second date. And they call them and say, hey, why didn't you ask this girl or this guy on a second date? Like, they thought that it went so well and they're waiting for you to call back. And at the end, you find out that they've been listening in on the call the entire time as they explain why they didn't reach out to them for a second date. And one of the episodes, and I think this is so indicative of what I'm talking about here, because this is the concept of truly striving to believe in what you believe in, right? Like trying yourself with your broken perspective to find the singular truth. Which leads to clear consciousness. And this is something that I've been talking a lot about before. It's not about doing what's right because it's correct. It's about doing what's right for a clear conscience. And what people have clear consciences on is very different. For example, going back to the weed thing, some people can smoke weed with a clear conscience, and that is fantastic. I think rationalization is one of the only evils in this world. Because it's something that rationalizing something is something that you believe is wrong inherently, but you convince yourself out of it, right? And do it anyway. And I think more people rationalize that weed is good than I think is true. Okay, anyway, going back to this, in this episode, he's like, why didn't you ask this girl on the second date? And he's like, hey man, I'm going to be honest with you. She's too smart and I'm looking for a dumb girl to like marry. And he's like, whoa, that's really freaking shallow, right? Proper American response there. That's really freaking shallow. What do you mean? He's like, hey dude, I'm a successful, driven, wealthy business guy. What I'm looking for is someone to be there for me. Like arm candy. And there's like moments when he was saying something really genuine and thoughtful. And then there was moments where he was saying something facetious and he was like balancing back and forth. Of like saying something really shallow and facetious and saying something really like, hey, no, this is just what I prefer. And then she got on the line and she's like, yeah, she has like 2 degrees and really wants to be driven for her job. And she eventually gets on the line and she's like, why did you keep asking me questions? Like, why were you so interested in me, you asshole? Why were you so interested in me and you didn't ask me on a second date? And the response was, I find you very interesting. I think that is amazing for you, but that's not what I'm looking for in a wife. I'm looking for someone to stay at home that I can coddle, that I can take on vacations, and they'll be there for me and raise a family and stay at home for me. I'm not looking for someone that's driven. I think that's really good. And he explained this. And then the co-host, which is a woman, and then the obviously the person that didn't get asked on the second date, assumed he's an asshole. Obviously, this became a very heated thing. And I think to most Westerners, that is fairly misogynist, which to an Easterner, not at all misogynist, I will be clear. But I think this is like a very American perspective and insight because she called him an asshole for it. And I find this to be very interesting from a projection perspective because if she truly believed that she was making the right decisions with her life, and if she truly had a clear conscience and had no doubts that her pursuing for a career and pursuing for education was superior, then she wouldn't hate him for it. But the fact that she hated him and called him shallow and was frustrated with his different subjective tastes that made her feel inferior, caused her to react and lash out and call him stupid. Lack of clear conscience. She's basically to the point is she's self-projecting. And she doesn't believe and she's frustrated that other people, because she's certain that is the correct way. And if anybody else thinks that anything different is incorrect. This is exactly the flaw I currently see, especially as we kind of go into this red leaning culture, and we're going to way overcompensate. As we do every single swing, left and right, we eventually overcompensate. I am not scared, but I do think that people should become aware, and if we want to evolve, we should become aware not to overswing and go back into singular truth, correct perspective. Like, I'm right, because I'm Christian. I'm right because everybody should be this way and I'm certain of it. It can easily fall back into that. And so what I think is, for the purpose, you don't have to fully understand what I'm saying. This is a highly developed thought with a lot of thoughtfulness. And if you throw away this concept and assume that I haven't thought much into this, or that I don't know what I'm talking about, or I'm committing eisegesis from the scriptures, you don't know what I'm talking about. I'm not asking you to respect me or understand me in this. I'm at least be considerate enough to say that I've thought a lot about this, okay? And I'm going to find out that I'm wrong. Sure, that's a big part of the process. A correct part of the process is finding out that you're wrong years later. But in this point in time, I think that people should be focused on clearing their own conscience on whatever perspective that is. Like, if that is through religion, through Christianity, through Islam, through Buddhism, through the Baha'i faith, through Hindu, through general altruistic, service-oriented atheism, agnosticism, fucking Roman deity. It doesn't matter. Or just general culture. Like in Japan, there is no religion, like dogmatic religion. So their values is more humanist in principle. Whatever it may be for you, whatever value set was given to you, on top of what you eventually determine is important, and you should focus on those and have a clear conscience. And if you have a clear conscience, I think that you will better align with creativity and art, and you will better self-trust yourself, and you will make better decisions that you will not regret ever in the future. Again, the woman in her choices and whatever in this clip, I think is projecting of her lack of confidence in her decisions. And it not at all was projecting that this guy is shallow. Yeah, sure, he might be shallow for sure, but like, he's trying to save her from a bad relationship, something that she doesn't want. He doesn't want to chain her down, right? And she's and her and the co-host are both belittling, ad hominem attacks on the dude for wanting something that they think is different, that is objectively incorrect. And I think that is low IQ thinking, low level awareness thinking. So just focus on what gives you clean conscience. And I think to wrap it all up and bring it back to where we're coming from is, if you do that, I think people will make better art. Creatives will make better art. You'll have a better career. You will have a better, more fuller experience with life, with more contentment and happiness and joy and deeper empathy for those that are around you. And it will lead to more altruism and service of those around you. And again, going back to music, mixing, better mixes, better art, better creativity, clear conscience, clear thinking. That's the point. The point of the episode of this is, before I was on the stage of individual truths, and I disagree with myself now. That's the biggest thing I flipped on. And it's more macro, philosophical, non-tangible, but I think that this has probably had the biggest impact on my creative processing and understanding what I'm passionate about and understanding what I think is art and how I add to what I talked about earlier, which is the idea of art, the philosophy of art. And I think it's important for people to move up levels from doing things for selfish reasons, doing things for doing things for the community, doing things for the world, and then beyond that, doing things for the universe, God, or the art, the craft, whatever that is. And so I think that's like really important, especially with AI. That with AI coming, you must align with whatever value systems that you believe in, whatever. And you must have a clear conscience in order to make better art. I think that that's important. And for some very, 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 very few exceptions, what gives them a clear conscience is something extremely different from those, from the norm. And that's what makes those people great.
I like that. Yeah.
I went on a long tangent. That's the biggest thing, is I'm moving away from individual truth. Before the podcast, I moved away from singular truth with certainty. And then from the podcast, individual truths. Yeah, I think, and the reason why I bring this up is because I do think it has a big impact on my perception of music and art and the value of it to me personally and the value of it to the world. Very interesting.
Yeah.
Anyway, I have a lot more thoughts on that, but I think I have to be careful. I think I gave away too much information in the sense that like this is something that is very sacred to me and something that is very easily pearl before swine conversation. It's very difficult to understand. It's only a topic for those that are actually seeking higher forms of enlightenment. But to the point, the only thing that I'll say beyond that is that if you are highly educated and you feel like you understand how the world works, but it's only led you to nihilism or cynicism, a distrust for humankind, a distrust for the elite, the distrust of the wealthy, which isn't incorrect, by the way, which isn't incorrect necessarily. People who get to that level, which is a high level of awareness, a lot of people in that level of awareness have to wonder, is this the end? Is the purpose of my education and increasing awareness all to find out that the world is shit and a horrible place to be? Or is there a way to return back to childlike spontaneity and happiness without the naivety? And I will tell you right now, if you've ever wondered that, which is not a lot of people, most people don't even get to the cynicism stage, but there are at least 2 to 3 more stages beyond that. Most people don't even get to the last stage. Like objectively, most people do not. There's a couple awareness models and faith-based models. One is Dr. James Fowler's Stages of Faith, which I think is really interesting. I think the critiques on that book is valid and model is valid. There's a few awareness models based on Dr. hold on, I got to look it up because it's been a minute. Dr. Jane, not Jane. Hold on one second. I gotta go back to, so this isn't just like me making shit up and like thinking about it. This is like actually,
data.
Yeah, there's a lot of data behind this and like objective levels of awareness. First off, I find this fascinating. Tie-Dye Homie also sent me a post that says, studies have found that in Africa and parts of Asia, people with schizophrenia typically report hearing kind and playful voices as opposed to violent and cruel voices heard by those in Western societies. I looked this up. I didn't believe it. There's been a study in 2014 by Stanford anthropologist Tanya Luhrmann and her team. There's been a bunch of different studies confirming that people in northeastern Africa and Asia, their schizophrenia and their demons are positive and are more correlated. Yeah. So in individualistic,
can you, like, on a visual aspect, could you imagine just seeing a demon and being like, "Hey, have a good day. You have a great time, man. I hope you do great today." And you're just like, "Thank you, demon."
Oh, I found it. Okay. So this is Dr. Claire W. Graves' Levels of Human Existence and Awareness. Mm-hmm. And then this turns into David Hawkins' Map of Consciousness. And then, which is actually, goes into like Ken Wilber's Integral Theory. So there's different levels and theories of ego, self-development, awareness that I'm pulling this out of. Again, if you want a more accessible level of understanding of how to get to this level, how to go beyond cynicism, nihilism, and hating the world and believing everybody is against you. How do you get beyond that? First off, I'm going to let you know that there is hope. And I didn't see this before, and this is part of the episode. I didn't see this before. There is hope. There is good. You can go back to a childlike joy, happiness, optimism, spontaneity without having to engage in naivety. Again, okay, I would recommend, again, this is a book that I've encouraged many, many times, The Courage to Be Disliked. You got to read that book. It's Courage to Be Disliked, I think, is like the first step to kind of being introduced to this concept. I think there's a lot of truth to this. And I'm going to say something slightly racist. In Eastern societies, they've had, with longer documented human civilization that hasn't been broken down and rebuilt again. Like America is a very new concept. Western civilizations are fairly new because they keep migrating, right? They kept migrating. East Asia is always, like, Japan's been there for tens of thousands of years. Like they haven't, they've had wars and stuff, but like they're not migrating. So this is a concept. I do find it fascinating that they've, historically speaking, China and Japan has gone through the same stages of spiritual development like Christianity and Islam has, but has ended up, and again, this is where I'm going to say something that's fairly racist. Forgive me on this. I don't actually think that this is superior. It sounds racist. It's not. I don't think it is. It's just curious. Is that in the East, philosophically, they've come to the conclusion that gray and removing black and white thinking is the correct way to go. Going back to childlike spontaneity, the concept of wu wei in Chinese, or in Japanese mui, the purposeful release of self-control and reactionary state of being. This is the higher, in all of these ideas and models of self-awareness and consciousness and in faith, it comes back to that. Almost all models of awareness come back to that sort of level of thinking. And what I'm not saying is that all Japanese people and all Eastern Chinese people and all Taiwanese, Malaysian people or whatever are all like that. We got some fucking dumbasses over there, right? Mm-hmm. That being said, I do find it interesting that the part of the world that has objectively the highest average IQ in the entire world has come to that level of conclusion. And I think that there's levels beyond that. But on average have come to those levels of conclusion. What I'm not saying is that they're superior for it. And I think the process of getting to that point is important. I don't think it should be thrust upon someone and someone should be belittled. But I'm going to say this. How many Buddhists do you see hating on Christians in YouTube comments? Okay. How many Buddhists do you see writing hate comments?
3.
Defending their own positions. How many Taoists do you see hating on other religions?
I don't know. I'm not gonna lie.
I think there's a little
religion hate thing between one another is probably a big factor why I've always had kind of a personal view as to why I don't personally go to church or not. I've spoken about it before where I'm like, dude, most times when I hear somebody saying like, oh, this way is the right way, it's like, that's an absolute that is based on faith, which, if I'm not mistaken, even you mentioned it earlier, certainty is like the opposite of faith. So
yeah,
I think there's just so much that I found hypocritical early on that, like, from what you said earlier, we're like, it might sound racist, it might sound this or that. I'm like, I don't think it sounded racist. If you think about it logically, that makes sense.
No, it can be, what I said can be interpreted as racist because they assume that I think that East Asians are superior because of a higher IQ.
That's what I'm saying.
But that's not the point.
That's exactly what I'm saying though. But because if somebody were to read into it like that, it's like, now you get it. Now it goes into that reason of why I just had a hard time listening to anybody about anything.
Yeah.
Because they take it too personally.
There's absolutely, and this is a problem with sexism, racism, or the assumed version of those words in the West, is that they're based on certainty. And I think that those are real issues. And when we continually, and we're coming to terms with this in Western society, when people throw around these words without much thought and process and understanding, what it does is it belittles and dishonors the word and those that actually are struggling with those things. Anyway, I'm gonna stop and I'm gonna shut up with these concepts here. But the point is, on the topic of this episode, that's probably the biggest mind change that I've had on this. And it directly affects my art. And I hate to say this, a lot of non-creatives who hear creative processes and actors, actresses even, and they're getting overly emotional when Ariana Grande is holding her co-actress's hand and be like, it's okay, and like rubbing her hand in an interview and people are hating on it. Most people, I think that these conversations, philosophical, non-tangible, problem-solving conversations for the creative actually do have importance, because in order to make better art, and in order for Ariana, I forgot the co-host's name, the one that played Griselda or in Wicked. There's like a going viral, Cynthia Elphaba. Cynthia Erivia. There's like a clip. There's a clip of Ariana Grande holding Cynthia's hand and like being like, I hear you, girl. I hear you. And people are like hating on that. And I find that very interesting. I think that there's a lot of value in like we are feeling emotions and emoting for those who don't and can't, who are incapable, whether of nature, nurture, who's to say. So I think these sort of conversations, may seem non-practical, but I think clearing your conscience and thinking deeply of your own ego and building self-awareness for creatives is a very important and integral, necessary part of the creative process, which is why I talk about this stuff. If I was making a business podcast that wasn't based on creativity, that was just based on making money, these conversations are arguably a waste of time. But because we are creatives, I think that these are more important, which is why I will continue to speak on them.
Touching on business for a last quick point on a switch that I did that I think is probably my biggest switch. Content creation, which I think you would agree with me on this. And I think this is my biggest switch. Like I've mentioned it before where I'm like, even on the podcast, when you asked me at first to like do an episode with you and then to like furthermore co-host with you, even in that moment, it was like so against the grain for me. Like it was one of those things where I'm like, I'm a big believer in trying things at least once and then making your decision after experiencing it yourself, you know? But I was a big believer in content creators are not professionals. Now, I still have a slight belief in that, but with a better sense of understanding because I've done it before. I know people who do it, and talking to them and learning about their lifestyle and how they go about things. There's a very slight amount of truth still behind that. But my main point is this. I've gone on to make YouTube videos. We're doing the podcast now 4 years together and everything. And I understand the benefits and the need for content creation as a professional, both in the sense of marketing and also a personal, genuine, like when I create content, I don't do it because I'm after 1 million views. I do it because I genuinely like to teach and I like to share information. But because of my workflow, I can't really put out a video a day. I can't match the output of Cold Caparoon and all that. But with that said, I know people will talk shit about a lot of YouTubers and say, well, they don't actually do the work. So, you know, there is the notion that, you know, if you're learning from a YouTuber, you're not learning from a professional. That's slightly true and not true, because some of the best ones are not high production value. They're not releasing every day. You know, there are people who create content who are actually working professionals. And because of that, they don't really have the time to do one-a-days. A great one is Eric Valentine, Making Records with Eric Valentine. I think his YouTube channel is honestly very insightful. I think it's very good. I think it's very well spoken through and everything. And because of that, channel. Yeah, I have a lot of respect and love for his content. I think people like Jesse Ray Ernstern, who's created a couple videos here and there, also has like some pretty good videos where this guy's very busy. So he's not going to do one a day, not one a week, maybe once a month, you know, kind of stuff. And what's funny is like he records them out of his car. You know, I think the last one was out of his car, which I think is what gives me that view of like, listen, sometimes you just want to share the information that maybe you just learned, you've rediscovered. You know what I mean? It's like yesterday I rediscovered an artist named Cola Boy, which I fucking love this guy. This guy's got physical disabilities, but yet still makes some really funky music. And it's so good that I was like working out at the gym, like dancing while doing like, I forgot what we were doing. We were doing like the leg press, and I get off the leg press and I just continue dancing. I don't care who's around me. You know what I mean? So sometimes you hear that song that like re-sparks a memory or a feeling and everything. You just want to share it with people. And sometimes people create content around that. So just because you see people releasing content doesn't mean that there's somebody you shouldn't take seriously or they don't know what they're doing. Some of those people really are about that life. They really do what they're teaching about. So I would always hold back from creating content because I didn't want to be seen as a content creator. I didn't want to be seen as somebody who's just posting for the algorithm and this and that. And that held me back from doing a lot of like social media stuff. 4 years ago, that was my mindset. Nowadays, I'm like, I really like this. I want to make a video about it. And I'm going to make a video that I think is cool. And I'm going to talk about the points that I want to talk about and, post it up. And if it does well, that's great. If it doesn't, it's all the same to me. Because of that, I also understand that those same videos have led to new work. They've also led to a better understanding for other people knowing that they can reach out, ask questions and things like that. And they've weirdly helped build certain bonds that just didn't exist before. So the benefit of it all, really, really poked through even with the very little that I did. So if you're fighting the idea because like, you know what? I don't like being in front of a camera. My YouTube, those like intro reels, whatever that they do for YouTube. Like if you go to somebody's channel for the first time, there's a clip that they can upload that will go to first timers only. If you go to my YouTube channel, I have one of those videos. It's only like a minute long. And even in it, I say, I'm just trying to get over myself of not liking being in front of a camera. Like I'm just trying to get over myself. That's the point of that YouTube channel.
Yeah. I think there's, as far as social media too, like I've added, maybe not changed my mind, but I've added to the reasons why I think it's good. I've always wondered if making content was bad because there was this level of mystery that I felt was important for branding and PR, especially for those that wanted to have higher end branding.
Mm-hmm.
And I mean, that's one of the 48 laws of power is this
have an air of mystery around you.
Yeah, have an air of mystery. I do find it fascinating, though, that I've changed my mind. I think there's two other things that I want to add to the reasons why I think it's important. One, it humanizes people and concepts. So I think in a Cosmopolitan article, in a 15-second, even within 15-second Instagram pics and posts, it's very difficult without podcasts, without longer form media, to properly discuss the nuance. Like I think with everything technical that we talk about, one of the reasons for the success of the show is that we talk about and articulate the nuances of all of these different techniques, topic, gear, philosophy, etc. And we have the time to do so with these longer form podcasts. I think that's like really, really important as we kind of level up as humans to accept and understand the nuance of things. Number two, I think with social media, and this is, I think, really, really good for humanity, is that we remove the idolization of celebrities.
Yeah.
I think that's really important. There's significantly less power in celebrities. Even within the movie film, unless you're Tom Cruise, you don't pull people into a theater just because of your name anymore. Like it has to be a good story. Like it has to be a good story, right? And so when we remove the mystery, not only do we get to talk and have more nuanced conversations, but we can also remove the idolization of ideas and people and philosophies, where we can focus on what's most important, which is the craft, the story, in our case, the writing, the production, the arrangement, the mixing, right? I think how the songs make us feel. I think the removing of idolizing people is super important.
I'm not gonna
I think
lie.
that's part of human nature that's like never going to go away, but it's not as impactful and important to society and personal identities as it was 20 years ago, 40 years ago, 100 years ago.
I'm not gonna lie. When you mentioned Tom Cruise, I got really curious about that latest Top Gun movie and how it did in the box office.
It did super well.
Holy crap, did it? 1986, the first one made 177 million internationally. The Maverick made 1.49 billion.
Nice, great.
Whoa, that's impressive. Yeah, because I hate to admit it, but yeah, bringing in Tom Cruise does help. Yeah, that guy seemingly. Does he age?
There's a few actors and actresses that can pull names just from names.
Yeah.
So it hasn't completely disappeared.
Yeah.
But I
a
mean,
few.
that's
the thing though. It's a few. Back then, you could go to a Blockbuster. Oh my God, I'm showing my age.
I believe yeah, go ahead.
Yeah, you can go to Blockbuster and there was like, no matter what genre of movie you're looking at, you knew that there was like a couple top people in those genres that all pulled names. And so you could throw a couple of them together and you knew it was going to do well. Nowadays, there's like really,
Why did you say I'm showing my age? Do you feel bad about your age?
No.
Do you feel bad about it?
No, I'm just saying like even some of my sisters never experienced Blockbuster like
but
I did.
Why did you for a moment show a sense of shame?
I wouldn't take it as shame, but like reminder of like, wow.
Why do you feel bad that you're
Blockbuster has
older?
been that long. Like Blockbuster had the chance to buy Netflix is a memory. And they said no, and everybody was like, "No, Netflix ain't gonna do that." Good. Like I have these real time memories of like those conversations of like, "Wow, Netflix is a thing." I don't know how long that's gonna last, and now we're seeing Netflix now, so it's kind of like nostalgic the way I'm looking at it. Like I'm not seeing it as shame. I'm seeing it as nostalgic. Yeah,
I'm not the person to determine what you meant or how you felt. I'm just I was gonna prove a point by like I find it curious that your subconscious reaction to saying that out loud made you react and say, "Ooh, I'm showing my age," as if that's a bad thing. Why are you subconsciously certain that it's a bad thing to get old?
I don't think it's actually. I'm not gonna lie. I've actually always looked forward to getting older, just because I've always had older friends.
But then why not in that moment? Why not in that moment?
In that moment, I'm looking at it as like, wow. That was a while ago. Blockbuster has not been a thing in so long that there's literal people who've never seen a Blockbuster store around. And I don't feel bad for that, but that's kind of like, when was the last time you saw Circuit City?
Yeah. I won't.
You know what I mean?
I won't.
When was the last time you saw, like, Hometown Buffet, I think is kind of a throwback at this point. Like, I know that was 2020 when they like fucking collapsed. But like even Hometown Buffet to me is like nostalgic.
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's not even showing my age. Everybody remembers Hometown Buffet as long as even now you could say people who were 13 at that time would remember that. But even them are 17 right now and they're probably like, oh, I remember that when I was 13.
Yeah.
It's not a shame thing. It's wow, that's nostalgia right there. Blockbuster is a like cult classic nostalgia memory brand. Like buying your licorice at Blockbuster was a thing versus now you just go on your TV and just click a button and the movie's there.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Which is great, dude. I like it. I'm okay with it. I saw a Redbox machine outside of the 7-Eleven the other day towards...
See, and that to me is nostalgic too. Like a Redbox machine, I have not seen one in a while.
Yeah, they're definitely not around here, but it was about Palos Verdes. What is it? Pablo Verdes?
Palos Verdes, yeah.
Down south by Torrance. Yeah.
Literally, you know the translation for it?
What is that?
Green sticks.
Hell yeah, dude.
The green sticks.
Nice. Anyway, I think we should wrap up the episode. I won't push you more on that topic, but that's the sort of thing that I think is like important to build awareness on. Moments of reaction, unconscious reactions Like, I find it like, and this is not like a good or a bad thing, but we do this a lot as humans, where we predetermine certainty in one way or another, and that comes out in our actions and our language. And in that moment, subconsciously, in a moment of reaction, you reacted to yourself, finding out that, oh shoot, I am that old. And then you defended yourself subconsciously. So it's like, and I don't think it's a bad thing necessarily.
Yeah.
But I do think that this at a very practical level affects our art and affects how we treat ourselves, and in turn, how we create art. I think those that go on Facebook and see bad children and blame the parents in the comment are only building themselves up to be more judgmental to themselves when they eventually have children. I think, and which can, if done too much, can lead to, I don't want to have children, removing themselves from something that is fundamentally, genetically, the most important part of our existence. Like the one thing that we all are built to want, which is to carry on our DNA, and we rationalize and move away from that. This is regardless of religion. We're talking about straight just genetics here. And we rationalize that we don't want kids because we build up our own ego and we continue to judge others. I think that when we judge others, that's eventually becomes something that we judge ourselves based off of. Have you noticed the people that struggle the most with people pleasing are the most judgmental themselves?
Yeah.
I find that to almost always be the case. And that is a very judgmental, overgeneralized comment to make. And I'm not sure if that's true, but philosophically, I think that's important to believe in order to, if that builds awareness, to remove that judgmental part of ourselves. I don't think that's the case for everybody. I don't think that's generally true, but I think that if that helps you build the tool set to build awareness and remove judgment for yourself and love yourself more, then go ahead and believe that. All of our perspectives are broken anyway. Anyway, let's, that was a really deep, stupid, I love talking about those things. I think that me being really curious and talking a lot about these things is the reason that I don't ascend into full-on enlightenment, and I never will as long as I'm curious about these things. And
is full-on enlightenment at a certain point just fuck it?
Intentional fuck it. It's again going back to the Chinese concept of Wu Wei, which is intentional non-action. So to a Christian, you're putting me on a whole topic. To a Westerner,
I like how you felt the need to defend it.
There you go. Here we go. I'm very insecure about talking about these things. It's like very unnecessarily talking about these things. There you go. Exactly. That's a great point. There's in Western conversations, the idea that like, and this is, by the way, this is in culturally current interpretations of Western concepts and philosophies, and this will change and evolve into different stages later. But the concept of Wu Wei, and so someone that argues, a Westerner that argues, so an Easterner will argue and say, for example, in the show Shogun, they're very much about shikume and unmei, which is fate and destiny, or destiny and fate. That's more correct in the order that I said it. Shikume is destiny, unmei is fate. And the thing is, letting go of your own free will to allow fate to move and to dance with fate is a very important part of Eastern philosophy and understanding, and the baseline of Eastern religions in a general point. To a Westerner, they would interpret that as, where's free will? If you let go completely to fate or destiny, that is, free will is very important. Making decisions and practicing certainty is very important to the Eastern world. And I'm going to prove why that's not true scripturally in a moment. What this happens is, the argument in Shogun and the argument of Easterners is, when we are constantly subconsciously reacting to every thought, idea, word, taking things personally, when we are in a world where we are in a cyclical reactionary state to completely let go and give up our desire to be correct, our desire for certainty is the ultimate form of free will. In a world where we are not practicing free will by reacting, to let go of reacting through free will is the ultimate form of free will. And Christ said the same thing too, very similarly, where it's like, let go of your desires and follow me. Let go, like it's not about your wants. Let go of everything. Follow me. Let go of everything. You must let go of everything to enter the kingdom of heaven. Right? Christ said a lot of the same things too. So it's very important to consider that. Anyway, I'm done. I'm fucking done, dude. I apologize. This is not a theology podcast. This is just two nerds who care deeply about different things. Religion and theology and philosophy is Joe Rogan's aliens and conspiracy theories. That's what this show is. You know, his wrestling is your Pokemon cards.
Which MMA I can say,
Pokemon cards.
I know I said this on social media, but my biggest flex with Pokemon cards now is like, dude, I went through like a deep cleaning yesterday. I told Anna, I'm like, I don't want to do anything this Sunday. I just want to clean. Like, I want to do a deep dive into things. And even today, I'm just going to continue cleaning. But earlier this month, I sold 95% of my collection. And that paid for my console.
Dude, you're growing up. No, I'm just kidding. That sounds mean.
You're finally a man.
That sounded.
And then I'm over here with
mean,
fucking
how do you feel
on
about
merch.
That? How do you feel about that?
I think it's my biggest flex because I bought my own live sound console, which is not cheap. It's 5 figures, you know, for the console alone. But I would say that it was kind of cool to see a passion that I took as an investment style, and then investment style really came back in full force for me the way I hoped it would. Which everybody knows, when you invest in something, there's no guarantee. You open a studio, there's no guarantee that it's going to go great. When you invest in the equipment to start a studio from home and try to book clients, there's no guarantee that you will find the clients that you're looking for. So it was really cool to see all that. But my biggest flex is saying that something that I've been passionate about since I was a kid, that I kind of let go of because, like, at a certain point, society kind of tells you to grow up, so to speak. Like, when it comes to cartoons and things like that, me and Anna talked about how she stopped watching Nickelodeon at one point because she hit an age point where, like, her surroundings, her friends, and everything were like, oh, cartoons are for kids, you know? So, like, you kind of just grow up to move away from certain things. But even as an adult, when I refound collecting and playing the games and all that kind of stuff, finding myself replaying all the old games, it was really cool to say that, like, yo, Pokemon, as lame as some people might want to say it is, it paid for my console. Like, if you factor in what I paid for those cards and collections and all that and what I sold them for, like, I only paid a third of what the console's really worth in hard cash. You know, so that was really cool. So I like going around and just knowing, like, this console was paid for with Pokemon cards. That was a terrible song, but you get the point. Like, there's just that happy little moment of, like, hell yeah, Pokemon cards paid for this. That's my flex. That's my weird flex.
Good for you, dude. Good for you, dude. Yeah, dude. Yeah. In that moment too, before, I used to, like, bag on you for wasting money on Pokemon cards, which was me determining that my thinking was certain. Like, I was certain that that is a superior form of thinking. Yes, if you spend too much money on Pokemon cards, you may go into debt.
Yeah, you can
but
go
who's to
really
determine
bad with
that? But who's to determine that getting into debt over the long term is not a lesson that you needed? That lesson may be very valuable for you. Obviously, it's bad to be in debt. You don't want to be. Yeah. But, like, anyway, going into that, that's my biggest change recently, and something that I'm currently processing and thinking about, and currently evolving into is that I'm trying to become less judgmental by removing my fear-based desire for certainty.
Mm-hmm.
And for the purpose of better art and returning back to my childlike love and passion for creativity, art, and for the music that I work on. And I think that will translate to my clients and through the work that I have. I don't think it's how I use a compressor that's going to take me to the next level. I think it's returning back to that initial childlike taste, something that my children have so much.
Yeah. It's kind of funny. The return to the basics is almost the fundamental view I have on live sound. Like it's the ultimate call of like, hey, if you don't have a wave server, which by the way costs like $4,000 to $5,000 to get a sufficient one for most shows. If you don't have that, if you don't have the Apollo X16D to link up with your console, like let's just be honest, you're back to basics. You got the stock compressor from the console, the stock EQ, you got the stock preamps. You ain't got no flourishes, and if you can't mix a show well with that, it's a whole other thing. And the funny thing is, whenever I do a show, I don't care if I have the premium stuff. I got put in front of a $120,000 console for this weekend's show that I had never used before, yet was still able to run the whole thing for the first time. I just had to watch somebody work on it for 5 minutes to understand the workflow difference, because guess what? The EQs all operate the same. Compressors all operate the same. Cool. Yeah, you could switch the order of them and however you want. You can still feed different signals to different people and have different tap points and all that. It's the same basic logic on every console. Every compressor has the same basic logic. Every EQ has the same basic logic. And how you use it, and ultimately just making sure that what you hear in front of you, if you had to make quick decisions and say, that guitar now sounds better to me, the vocal sounds compressed well enough right now. Nobody cared that entire show if anybody had a 3-to-1 ratio. Nobody cared.
Yeah.
Just go back to basics. Just go back to enjoying it. And I think that's what I really like about live again. It's like, it's just quick thinking, no overcritical listening. Like critical listening because it's your job to make sure it sounds good for everybody. But no overthought. Just go back to that blissful joy point where you're just moving at a certain point.
That, like having Kyo, going back to that Down syndrome conversation, I think he helps a lot to help me be in the moment and be mindful and be aware that when I'm overthinking, which is a hobby of mine, I love to overthink.
I like it that it's described as a hobby.
Yeah, dude, I am extremely curious and easily fascinated by people, ideas, concepts. And to your point, dude, is I think eventually those that become more advanced in their mixing, and I think it's okay to be aware of this. I don't think I'm taking away anybody going through the process of learning when I say this. I think it is important, and we've both done this, to go through what I call the valley of technicality, to go through being hyper-fixated on how a compression works, how these ratios work, how the electronic signals work. What is feedback versus feed-forward compression? What is DC threshold versus AC threshold? How does reverb and the different types of reverb and specific aligning delays or aligning pre-delays for a reverb to the exact timing of the song, or creating reverbs based on the key of the song or whatever, right? Like learning these things is important and is foundational to the process of eventually letting go.
Yeah.
So those that are very beginner and quite frankly, very dumb, will claim that theory is not important. Music theory is not important. Low IQ people. Not actually IQ. I think this is more like a progress thing. So it's not, I don't think it's related to IQ. I think it's more just like a personal progress thing.
Early checkpoint people.
Yeah, early checkpoint people. There you go. Eventually, those people will move into, I love theory. Theory is everything. I hate on people that don't think theory is everything. I am superior because I have theory. Then there's a third level, which is what we're talking about now, which is going back to what from the outside sounds exactly like those with lesser experience, which is now that I have theory, I realize theory means nothing. But
like it means everything in maybe a precursor.
Those that are less personally developed and those that are more highly personally developed have very, very similar thoughts. So here's the thing. I do think the process of nihilism, cynicism, the process of going through the valley of technicality, the process of overthinking everything is fundamental to the creative growth of every artist and creative. Yeah. In order to eventually, like every jazzer that is on stage trying to have conversations with his fellow musicians through improvisation and swapping fours, changing eights or whatever, you must understand what keys that you're working with, how your instrument works, the theory behind your music in order to express and have a conversation. But once you have that understanding, that's when you can totally let go, break free of the rules and do your own thing and express yourself fully. So I will never, ever, ever judge. So I'm trying consciously to never judge anyone based on their progress, but I'm letting you know that it is important. And this is a natural part of it. There is another level of optimism, emotion, and returning back to the basics for the joy of music. There is joy to be had. And this is an important message for those that are currently struggling with liking music. Everybody goes through this. A lot of people that do well, almost everyone that is doing well in music goes through this. They go through a phase of, I don't know if I like music anymore. That's normal. You're not alone. Don't feel lonely. That is a very human and normal process. There is a light at the end of the tunnel. You can start loving music again. You do have to keep working on it. Yes. Okay. I think that's a great place to end.
Yep.
Yeah, this one a little long, really long. My bad. On that note, if there's any other questions, please feel free to leave in the comments. If you're on Spotify or on YouTube, if you've noticed things that Lou and I have changed our minds on, or things that you've changed your mind on because of the podcast, right? Or things that you hope to change your mind on, whatever, whether it's personal or something that we've talked about, please comment that on Spotify or on YouTube, wherever you can leave comments. I don't think you can leave comments on Apple Podcasts. So go to YouTube or go to Spotify, leave a comment of how things that you've changed your mind or things that we've changed your mind on or that you've seen us change our minds on. And maybe we can have another conversation on this. This is, I think, really important as we develop and change and continue to go through evolutions. And I am aware enough to know that if this is where I'm evolutionary peaked in awareness, then that's fucking sad because I'm way too young to peak now. All right. So I hope that in the next 5 years, we can look back at this episode and be like, damn, DK, you are dumb as a motherfucker. I hope that we say that.
DK, I think what you said that day was the dumbest thing you've ever said now in hindsight.
I really hope I say that. That'll really make me happy to feel that way. And on that note, happy mixing, my friends, and stay saucy.